demanding support now for a climate action plan. The environmental groups who want to make it a priority for San Diego's budget.
A lot of our students, they come to San Diego State, but they don't wander too far from campus or too far from where they live. And so I think it's important to realize that the community, San Diego, is huge.
Taking on food deserts in National City, the students who are applying real-world lessons, one grocery bag at a time.
This marketplace is a melting pot. You got a lot of baseball fans, Red Sox fans, Giant fans, Dodger fans, Cub fans. You see them here at Petco all the time. You put a winner in here, everybody who's a Padre fan will want to be part of this. They'll come.
The Padres are back in action. We'll take you out to the ballpark for the team's home opener. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Environmental groups are preparing for a battle over San Diego's climate action plan as Mayor Kevin Faulconer prepares to release his budget for the next fiscal year. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has more.
Faulconer is facing an estimated $10.1 million deficit, and virtually all city departments are facing budget cuts. Supporters of the city's climate action plan held a press conference today calling on the mayor to prioritize funding for biking, walking, and public transit infrastructure. City Councilman Chris Ward was among the speakers. He acknowledges the city has made progress on cutting its carbon footprint.
But the hard part and the biggest share of greenhouse gas emission targets is transportation. And so we've chipped away at that, but we really need to make those investments today if we're going to be able to sustain that course and dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions on our road to 2035.
2035 is the year the city hopes to have half of urban commuters getting to work without a car. Cars and trucks are the city's biggest contributors to climate change. The mayor is expected to release his proposed budget in 2 weeks. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Oceanside City Council has approved a medical marijuana ordinance to eventually legalize commercial growth, production, and deliveries. But KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says the ordinance does not include licensing any legal dispensaries in the city.
Oceanside City Hall was packed. The medicinal marijuana ordinance has been worked on for the past year, and supporters outnumbered opponents. Oceanside resident Joshua Tano said legalizing commercial cannabis operations would be an economic boost for the city.
Our local economy can evolve and open doors for opportunities in agritourism, culinary arts, regulation, security, equipment manufacturing, etc. The legalization of cannabis has opened a floodgate for new job opportunities and local business owners. Commercial and agricultural property values can rise with a plethora of supporting hybrid industries.
If the ordinance had passed, Oceanside would have been the only city in North County to license legal dispensaries, but newly appointed Mayor Peter Weiss cast the deciding vote to nix the plan. He presented an alternative ordinance instructing staff to develop a fee structure for licensed cannabis cultivation and manufacturing, but no dispensaries.
I'm supportive of staff's recommendations regarding the cultivation, distribution, manufacturing, nurseries, and testing. I believe we're looking at a minimum 12 to 18 months, if not longer, for any of those businesses to be actually operational. I am not supportive of any dispensaries at this point in time until the police department has opportunity to review dispensaries and other agencies.
Deputy Mayor Chuck Lowry was obviously disappointed by the outcome.
So we've done a lot of work that hasn't gone anywhere. That's quite frustrating.
Advocates for legalizing commercial cannabis operations say they are dusting off plans to put a citizens' initiative on the ballot, but that is unlikely to happen till 2020. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
U.S. and Mexican forces unite to go after drug smugglers. They want to see more of this. Here's video from earlier this month of U.S. Coast Guards offloading 36,000 pounds of seized cocaine in San Diego. The new operation will start Sunday and include Colombian forces. These countries are working together despite political tensions over immigration and other cross-border issues. Authorities say the operation will start off the South American coast where the drug flow is heaviest. Under a new program, Navy SEALs will be tested for brain injuries when they first arrive. It's an effort to understand the true impact of their service. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has the story.
Typically secretive, the Naval Special Warfare Group 1 on Coronado announced that everyone who enters the SEALs or special boat operators will now undergo baseline testing of their brain function. Football and other pro sports have begun looking more seriously at the cumulative effect of traumatic brain injuries. The VA recently started a campaign to get more women to donate their brains to science, specifically so they can track the long-term impact of concussions. The SEALs are working with the Traumatic Brain Injury Clinic at Naval Medical Center San Diego. It's part of the Navy's overall effort to provide regular cognitive screenings and streamlined treatment. In the past, special operators with a concussion might have to make several appointments with different doctors, a particular problem for SEALs who face demanding training and deployment schedules. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
A new policy ends the automatic release of pregnant women from immigration detention. Federal immigration officials announced the change today. They say these women will no longer receive special considerations that allowed them to stay out of detention while immigration courts took on their case. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement says women in their third trimester will generally be released. California drivers caught using another person's disabled parking card may end up paying hundreds of dollars in fines. Undercover investigators with DMV are cracking down. They held their latest enforcement operation at a Sacramento Walmart today. It's one of about 24 stings held statewide every month. The DMV has conducted 170 enforcement operations since last summer. They've handed out more than 1,600 citations so far.
You can't loan it to your brother. You can't loan it to your parents. You can't forge it. You can't take it. You can't. Only the person that is assigned that placard can use it legally. Otherwise, you're breaking the law.
Drivers found to be using a disabled person's parking placard illegally can be hit with a misdemeanor citation ranging between $250 and $1,000. Officials say they could end up paying more than $4,000 with fees from local jurisdictions. In San Diego's Barrio Logan neighborhood, homes can be built right next to industrial facilities like welding shops that emit toxic fumes. It's been that way for 40 years. The neighborhood was supposed to have a community plan update that would have changed that, but it was rejected by voters in a special election in 2013. Now there's controversy over an election for the group that would help make a new community plan. KPBS reporter Claire Tragesser has details.
Here in Barrio Logan, about 80 residents cast ballots for who should represent them on the community planning group. The votes have been counted, but Mark Steele, the head of the group, won't release the results. That's because he says an election last week was invalid since some people broke the rules. Staff for the nonprofit Environmental Health Coalition handed out flyers before the election that said who residents should vote for, and Steele says they needed to stand 100 feet away from where people were voting, but didn't.
It's pretty simple. It was, the rules were broken, so we now have to go back and redo it.
Diane Takvorian, the head of the Environmental Health Coalition, says there is no such 100-foot rule. She says it's important the election stands because the group is meant to represent the community.
Is really a breach of democracy and appears to be discriminatory because when these so-called rules are being applied, they were not applied in this way in a previous election.
The election was overseen by the city's planning department. A spokesman in the department says while there is no specific distance rule for campaigning, it's up to the Barrio Logan planning group to decide whether to hold a new election. Steele, the head of the group, says they'll vote on that at their next meeting on April 4th. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
The Sheriff's Department unveiled a new tool in their arsenal today. It's called Total Containment Vessel. It can be used to detonate explosive devices like in this video. It can also trap any harmful gases, chemicals, or biological or radioactive materials. The Sheriff's Department paid for the specialized chamber with a federal grant. Officials say the City of San Diego's Fire Rescue Department will share use of the device, and it will be deployed throughout the county as needed. San Diego State University students are leaving the classroom to address a community need. Brightside Produce is a nonprofit run by students. It supplies fresh fruits and vegetables to communities that lack access.
My father purchased the store around 1973, 74.
110 Liquor and Market is a fixture at the corner of National City Boulevard and East First Street.
It was already an established store since the 50s.
Owner Roger Atik knows many customers by first name.
A lot of my customers are older people that don't drive, so if they did forget to get something from the major markets, then we're here for them.
Shall we? Ooh, wow.
Thanks to a new partnership,
Perfect.
110 has added fresh produce to its aisles.
Impacting the community and be able to get them fresh produce and like a healthy option it's really good to see.
Catherine Fusen is a senior marketing major at San Diego State University. She's part of the store operations team for Brightside, which distributes produce to stores in low-income communities.
National City, I've never been here before, so it's interesting getting to learn about National City.
National City is about 15 minutes south of downtown San Diego. About 60,000 people call it home. And about a quarter of these people live below the poverty line, based on the latest census numbers.
We want to make sure that we're reaching the low-income consumers.
This is part of the reason SDSU marketing professor Iana Castro first focused on National City.
So Roger, total today is going to be $26.94.
You got it, bud.
When she co-founded Brightside Produce in June of last year.
We thought it would be a great place to start the program because of the number of small stores that essentially were not carrying produce, but that were the primary source of food for a lot of residents in the community.
Brightside has grown from 5 stores to 12. These students make the weekly deliveries themselves.
A lot of our students, they come to San Diego State, but they don't wander too far from campus or too far from where they live. And so I think it's important to realize that the community, San Diego, is huge.
Castro says students enrolled in her marketing and sales for social impact course not only gain new insight about San Diego's diverse makeup, but they get a real-world opportunity to apply their marketing skills.
We like having these signs just so people walking by or driving by or even the neighboring homes know that the stores now offer produce.
Senior Shannon Reynolds, for instance, leads the marketing and community outreach team, which drives advertising efforts.
I think it's incredible because when I walked in and saw that there were vegetables and fruit, I did a double take because you don't see anything healthy down here.
Angela Tabor is a customer at Big B Market on Coolidge Avenue, one of Brightside's partnering stores. She says she had nearly given up on finding anything healthy to eat in the area.
There is very little. It's all fast food restaurants, a Walmart and Chipotle and El Pollo Loco. And Chipotle and El Pollo is about the healthiest options down here.
Big B is in a food desert, a community vapid of fresh food and vegetables more than a mile away from a supermarket, as defined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
6 tomatoes.
Brightside is targeting stores in these areas. So far, it's expanding about 1 store per month. Many of its participating students, though, are graduating in May. Next semester, there will be a new batch making up the store relations and buying teams.
I just think it's really cool that we're helping out my neighboring community and, doing good for all of San Diego.
Reynolds says, as a South Bay resident herself, she's graduating more confident about entering the marketing field, knowing her work can brighten communities.
With nearly 500,000 people in San Diego lacking reliable access to enough food to eat, according to the San Diego Hunger Coalition, Brightside leaders say there's more work to be done and plan to continue expanding. The warm, dry weather pattern continues with possible fog rolling in overnight. Justin Povic has the full forecast.
Quiet weather conditions, well, that's really the case here over the course of the next couple of days. Dry weather is going to stretch out into next week. However, we will have some additional foggy nights coming up. Temperatures a little bit above normal. And you really have to search closely here on the satellite and radar to find any clouds higher up. Earlier on, there were some low clouds around, resulting in, again, some lower visibilities out toward the shoreline, Oceanside, La Jolla, Poway. Notice on the quiet side now those visibilities have come back up, and generally speaking, high pressure's in control, so that means quiet weather, not only locally, regionally, and all throughout, again, the southwest. Notice clouds lurking well offshore, and these are just crawling their way in our direction. So we talk about the overnight, we talk about fog rolling back in. In the marine layer, we're going to talk a lot about that here the next couple of days. We drop off into the mid-50s, Poway down to 50, Ramona 46, Borrego Springs at 61, Mount Laguna dropping off into the mid-40s, Alpine into the upper 40s. So, dry conditions, well, we're not talking about any rain here for Friday. Again, area-wide, but again, the concern, first thing would be the fog, the low visibilities that go along with, and it's going to take a little bit of time here for those temperatures to respond, but once they do, we're back above normal. Oceanside to San Diego, the 70s out there. Poway, look at this, mid-80s. Lots of sun out over the interior. And look at the sizzling sunshine, Borrego Springs, 94 degrees. Out toward the coast, again, foggy go over here the next couple of mornings, more so as we go into Friday, less so as we work our way into next week. Temperatures into the mid and the upper 60s. So you notice a little cooler air. We're back closer to normal. Inland locations, a little bit of fog here over the weekend. And we'll see a little bit of troughiness develop. It's going to be a dry system coming into play early next week, but again, there'll be some clouds at times. Overnight lows mostly in the 50s. Mountainous locations, a little breeze kicking up for Monday. A little cooler air as we venture into early weekend. Desert locations, notice it's remaining warm and remaining dry with lots and lots of sunshine. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Povic. Back to you, Ebony.
The subject of a popular podcast, Serial, is getting a new trial. A Maryland appeals court has upheld the ruling granting Adnan Syed a shot at freedom. Syed was convicted in 2000 of killing his high school girlfriend and has been serving a life sentence. His case was chronicled in detail in 2014 by the producers of This American Life, who uncovered some evidence that cast doubt on his guilt. The show attracted millions of listeners and shattered podcast records. As the San Onofre nuclear power plant is decommissioned over the next 20 years, the iconic twin domes will disappear. But KPBS reporter Allison St. John says the dangerous radioactive waste will remain, with no guarantee it will ever be removed.
Thousands of fuel rods packed with uranium pellets powered San Onofre and generated electricity for Southern California for 45 years. That spent fuel will remain radioactive for tens of thousands of years. Southern California Edison already has 50 casks full of spent fuel stored on site. Next to those storage units, there was an empty space beside a seawall with ocean waves lapping on the other side. Edison decided this space was its only option to store the next 75 casks, since the federal government has failed to find a long-term storage site for nuclear waste anywhere else in the country. In January, that space started filling up. Admiral Len Herring, who headed up Navy Region Southwest before his retirement, is one of many voices calling for the decision to be reconsidered.
But I believe that cost was a driving factor, expediency was a driving factor, and the associated risks that are now being identified by the group of individuals that I'm currently working with, I think are much more grave than what was put in that assessment.
Herring says the Nuclear Regulatory Commission may have given the go-ahead, but another federal agency, the Department of Defense, should consider the national security risks. He's looking ahead and says before the ocean comes over the seawall, sea level rise could compromise the bottom of the canisters holding the waste. They're buried just above the water table.
As sea level rises, the containers are subjected to elements that they simply are not designed to handle.
Transferring the fuel from cooling ponds and into dry cask storage is being done meticulously. It takes several days to get one giant canister loaded with 37 fuel assemblies and moved a few hundred feet from the fuel pools to the storage site. Herring wants the Navy to consider moving the waste to another spot on Camp Pendleton on the other side of the freeway, where it would be on higher ground. So far, the Marine Corps has rejected the idea. The next closest alternative being proposed is to store the waste in another nuclear power plant, about 350 miles east in Arizona, where Edison has part ownership at Palo Verde. Attorney Mike Aguirre, who has sued Edison over the decommissioning plan, believes this is the best bet.
No one wants to have nuclear waste necessarily move in their community, but we do have a shot at Palo Verde because they're already storing nuclear waste for California there.
Edison has asked and been turned down by Palo Verde, but Aguirre believes they should try again. The third option comes from the private sector, which is eager to tap into billions of dollars the federal government's collected for nuclear waste storage. But that money was designated for long-term storage at Yucca Mountain, and the government does not want to release it for interim storage. David Victor is chair of Edison's Community Engagement Panel, a group that meets quarterly to review what's going on at San Onofre.
And I would say that there is a gap opening between what the private sector is willing and able to do in this area and what the government needs to do in terms of changing federal law.
Two companies are now applying for licenses to build interim storage sites, one in West Texas and one in eastern New Mexico. John Heaton is chair of the Eddie Lee Energy Alliance in New Mexico.
We think that the reality is if Congress sees that a facility is in fact licensed and ready to operate, it may change their mind.
San Onofre is in the 49th Congressional District. Congressman Darrell Issa says finding an alternative site for the waste is one of his top priorities.
It's so easy for people to say no to a solution but not have an alternative. And in this case, people can feel that a particular site is not good, but if it's incrementally better than where this waste is today, then it has to be considered.
But Issa is stepping down, and Congress is distracted this year by elections, so there's little hope new legislation on nuclear waste will be passed in the House. The Senate doesn't even have a bill in the works yet. Meanwhile, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has changed the rules for how long nuclear waste can be stored on site, without changing the requirements for storing nuclear waste. Ray Lutz of the group Citizens Oversight has petitioned the NRC to require thicker double-walled canisters.
The key question is, we have canisters that have a design life of 40 years, and yet the Waste Confidence Report, the one they recently put out, says that these will remain on site indefinitely, and that's okay. Indefinitely is not 40 years.
Herring says the community must act soon because Edison's plan threatens future generations.
The people who have made the decision won't be around to deal with it. But unfortunately, there are folks like myself who I'm not focusing on myself anymore. I'm focusing on my grandchildren. And are we making decisions that are right for them?
Herring says while there may not be an issue for the next few years, there are no guarantees the storage containers won't be compromised by sea level rise or other threats that will put San Diego's inhabitants at risk. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, I speak to outgoing VA Secretary David Shulkin, the latest Trump cabinet member to be asked to leave his post. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Two astronauts who recently arrived at the International Space Station spent about 6 hours in the vacuum of space today to install new antennas and replace a broken camera. Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold blasted off from Kazakhstan last week and arrived at the 250-mile-high outpost 2 days later. Both men have previously experienced spacewalking. It's the fourth spacewalk for the space station this year. Well, another sign of spring, baseball season is back in San Diego. San Diego Padres opened their 2018 season at Petco Park today. And even though they lost to the Milwaukee Brewers in extra innings, KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says fans still have faith in their home team.
Baseball is back in downtown San Diego. Thursday, fans made their way through gates eager to see the 2018 Padres, who have some new faces. Players like Chase Headley and World Series champion Eric Hosmer could help the Padres break a 500 record, something the Friars have not done since 2010. Lee Hacksaw Hamilton covered the Padres for 25 years on radio and says things are looking up.
If they don't have any significant injuries to the pitching staff, I think they have enough firepower to be an 81-81 team, which would be 500. This marketplace is a melting pot. You've got a lot of baseball fans, Red Sox fans, Giant fans, Dodger fans, Cub fans. You see them here at Petco all the time. You put a winner in here, everybody who's a Padre fan will want to be part of this. They'll come, and all the out-of-town fans will come.
Padres executive chairman Ron Fowler told the Mighty 1090 player development is a key focus this season, and he's hopeful the team will break even on wins and losses. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, new questions about relationships on the 2020 census, the changes for same-sex couples. And on Midday Edition, immigrants used field work as a stepping stone to the California dream. Why that may be the only path for improving their lives. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.